You are listening to the Spactastic Mysteries podcast. We are continuing Anna Gale Lyne's second novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Without Clearance. Colonel Jessa Masters, a fearless and seasoned federal agent for the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau, IIB, commands the SpaceVessel Liberty with unparalleled precision. Alongside her partner and husband, Nate Masters, a skilled investigator with a sharp intellect, she has faced some of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. But nothing could prepare them for their next mission, a personal one. When a fellow federal agent is found brutally murdered aboard the Liberty, the crime scene is not just a professional setback, it's a chilling threat that hits too close to home. As Jessa and Nate dig deeper, they uncover clues that suggest this murder is no random act of violence. It's part of a decades-old vendetta, a sinister plot aimed at dismantling Jessa's entire family. Without Clearance is a high-stakes, action-packed space thriller filled with twists, conspiracies, and a powerful tale of love and loyalty in the face of overwhelming danger. This is episode 12, introducing Lancelot. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
Yeah, Dr. Manning confirmed that I am still pregnant with baby number 2, as I affectionately refer to this child, I voiced, leaning back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. I glanced at my watch, 0924 hours. I had to meet Nate in a half hour at Acacia Solomos holding cell, I continued, but I haven't told Jag yet, so I would appreciate it if you didn't either. Why haven't you told Jag? Graham started, leaning back in his chair. I noticed how haggard he still appeared, as if he hadn't been sleeping well. Dark circles clung to the bottom of his eyelids. Oh, I get it. You haven't told him because you are concerned that if you lose this baby, he might become unstable again. He looked over at me thoughtfully, folding his arms across his chest too. Aren't you? Normally, I wouldn't advocate keeping secrets. You know that, but in this case, Peacock, I think you are right to be cautious. Keeping this from him is tougher than I thought. I don't see where you have a choice, Graham continued, unfolding his arms. He leaned forward, running his fingers through what was left of his red hair. If you tell him, you could jeopardize your mission. Jag is an excellent agent, yes, but after that escapade, I can't take the chance that he might go ballistic. A wounded look crossed his face. Nate and I were not just agents under Graham's charge. To him, we were family. Together, Graham, Nate and I had been through the murders of fellow agents, shootings, stabbings and kidnappings of each other, marriages, children and many tight spots. Somehow all of those events bonded us for life. Although not related by blood or marriage, Graham was still a part of our family. And we were a part of his. And we had a bond that went far beyond blood or marriage. We had been in the trenches, taking down the bad people together. Now if I could put a muzzle on Dr. Manning's mouth, I could keep this baby a secret just a little longer. His bedside manner definitely needs some work. How's disarming the vendetta going? He inquired in a businesslike tone. He wanted to change the subject. I think that the thought of either Nate or me in pain was too much for him to handle. I was about to oblige when a knock came upon the entrance of my office. Come, I called toward the doors. They slid open, revealing my dark-haired brother-in-law leaning his 5 feet 10 inches body against the door frame, preventing the doors from closing. I hear congratulations are in order, he announced. I motioned for Colin to sit. Colin lowered himself into one of the chairs in front of my desk. I turned back to General Graham. Listen, Graham, I'll have to update you later. Dr. Manning shot his mouth off to another person about my precious cargo. I have to do damage control. Graham nodded and terminated the call. I faced Colin, resting my hands under my chin. How did you find out? Dr. Manning, Colin responded, folding his hands in his lap. He thought I needed to increase security around you, seeing as you are pregnant. I closed my eyes briefly. When I get my hands on that, doctor, I didn't finish that thought. Instead, I intertwined my fingers, resting my elbows on my desk. I looked up at Colin. Listen, I know that you and I started, gesturing back and forth between us, haven't always gotten along. Especially lately, but I need your help. Anything, he expressed. Concern crept into his voice as his face grew pensive and his eyes pinched together. What is it? Could I trust Colin to keep my secret? He had proven time and again that following orders was not his strong suit. But what other choice did I have? I drew in a deep breath before I ventured. I haven't told Nate about the second baby yet, pressing my lips together, after the way he acted when we lost Abigail. If we lose this baby, he could jeopardize our assignment, maybe even get all of us killed. I opened my hands and dropped my head into them. Please try to understand. It's for the good of the mission. He reached across the desk and touched my shoulder. Jessa. I glanced at him through splayed fingers. If I were in Nate's position, would want to know I had a baby on the way, he said, rubbing the muscles in his neck. People's lives aren't at stake every time I make a decision, but they are when you and Nate do. So is that a yes, I will keep your secret, or a no, I won't? You and I are family. I would do anything for you. Peering up at me, he added, I never had much of a family growing up. I grew up in an orphanage. I always dreamed of one day being a part of a real family, you know. A family where I belonged and everyone loved me. When I did finally get adopted, I really didn't feel that. I let my hands fall to the desk and lifted my head to really look, maybe for the first time, at my brother-in-law. Actually, I do know, I agreed, pushing the hair out of my eyes. You've met my biological family. I've always felt like an outsider looking in. I flashed him a say-tout dire smile, indicating that I had said all I needed to say on that subject. He nodded. My family's not much better. My adoptive parents are foreign correspondents, traveling around the world at a moment's notice. They barely acknowledge my existence. They didn't attend Joey in my wedding, Jessa, and she has never met either one of them. Colin, I am so sorry. I didn't know. You and I need to sit down and share childhood war stories. Glancing down at my stomach, I put my hand on it. A sickening sensation started in the pit of my stomach as a coldness traveled up my spine. I grabbed the arms of my chair. The only time I ever felt this way was when Nate. He was in trouble. I knew it with every fiber of my being. Nate could be in trouble anywhere in the universe, and I would know it. Colin arrived at my side in 2 seconds flat, kneeling beside my chair. What is it? You look like you saw someone rise from the dead. Is it the baby? Should I call Dr. Manning? Nate is in trouble, I provided, looking over at him. What makes you think that? When you have been partners as long as Nate and I, you tend to develop a sixth sense about these things. I pressed my thumb to my commlet, speaking into it. Lieutenant Colonel Masters, this is Colonel Masters, please respond. We waited a second, a minute, then 2, 3, 10. With every second, my anxiety mounted. Chip, please locate Lieutenant Colonel Masters. Lieutenant Colonel Masters is not on board the Liberty, replied Chip. That only means that Nate isn't wearing his commlet. I suspected that when he didn't answer my call, I declared, standing up. I walked in front of my desk and paced from one end to the other. Chip, do a DNA scan of the Liberty for Lieutenant Colonel Masters. Lieutenant Colonel Masters is not on board the Liberty, the computer concluded after several seconds. Chip, I prompted again, moving from the left side of the desk to the right. How many transports have left the Liberty today? I paced from right to left and back again. None, came the answer. Meaning he has to still be aboard, Colin assured me, staring up at me from his position on the floor. I then tapped my commlet 4 times, which dialed up the emergency hotline to General Graham. Peacock, this is Graham. What is the emergency? Graham greeted. A bit of annoyance in his voice. Graham, this is Peacock. Jaguar is missing. I tried to keep my voice steady and to keep my composure, but I felt like my blood had turned into jello. I've done a commlet and DNA scan of the vessel and no transports have left the Liberty today, but I am going to have Colin's team do a foot search. I quickened my pace as I flew from one end of the room to the other. I put Joey and the kids on a spacecraft bound for DC this morning. Very good, Peacock, Graham replied, an edge to his voice. You sound like you have everything under control. You are going to need help, so I'll send. No, I interrupted, holding my stomach with my other hand as I headed from one wall to the other. Agents aren't faring too well around here. First Brooklyn Curzon, and now Jag. What are you proposing? I stopped to study Colin, pressing my lips together again. I am proposing that I use Colin. Only for this assignment, of course. I watched Colin's eyes light up like a fix-it person in the middle of a hardware store, raising his eyebrows. He's family but distant enough not to be a target, and best of all, he has security training. I don't know. He's a civilian, Graham protested. I don't see that we have much choice. I resumed my pacing. I'll tell you what, you put agents en route to us, but keep them at a distance, just in case we need them. In the meantime, Colin and I will attempt to locate Jag and put an end once and for all to this vendetta. I will open a channel, so you can monitor the whole situation, and I will turn on my device, so you can track me. I moved back around my desk and Colin, standing in front of my window, staring out. When Graham didn't answer right away, I added in a lower voice, we use civilians all the time. It isn't as if he'd be a full agent. We will only use him in emergencies, like this one. I've heard enough. Graham sighed heavily. Go ahead and apprise Major Vincent of the situation. Turn your communication device to frequency 4-15B, so I can monitor you. And be careful. Thank you, you won't regret this, I noted, ending the communique. What can I do? Asked Colin, standing up. His eyes and face beamed with excitement. I tried to calm my nerves. What would I do if something happened to Nate? He and I had been partners since I graduated the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau training program 11 years ago. We'd become each other's best friend through the bad times, the good times and the worst times. He had been a constant support, my rock. I didn't know what I would have done if he hadn't been there for me after Ben and Joshua died. I should have told him about the baby, I chided myself. What if he never got to hold his baby? I need you to send out your officers to search for Nate on foot, I began, running my fingers through my dark hair. I know that your officers are on other tasks. Use as many as you can spare. Colin nodded, placing the necessary call. When he finished, he looked up expectantly. I reached behind the metal, hanging from the rainbow of ribbons on the chest of my coveralls closest to my heart and adjusted the frequency on the communication device inside it to 4-15B. Your job is to watch my back and assist me in locating Nate, I explained to Colin. I believe you can do it. So don't let me down. Do I get a code name? Only official agents have code names. When I noticed how Colin's features fell, I acquiesced, but since you are working on an unofficial case, I guess, we can bestow you with an unofficial code name. I twisted my mouth, searching for just the right one. Then it came to me. How about Lancelot? The defender of all that is good, the protector of damsels in distress. Colin grinned. I pulled my gold chain that held a locket with pictures of Ben, Reggie and me on one side and Nate, Joey and Colin out from under the collar of my coveralls. Grabbing the wedding ring my first husband Ben gave me, I pried open the top of the diamond and pressed a button. When the button began to blink, I shut the diamond and shoved the ring and chain back under the collar of my coveralls. Just in case there is trouble, Graham will know where to find us. Then I filled Colin in on the rest of the details of the case. When I had finished, my company clerk, Lieutenant Thornhart, waltzed into my office. This was just delivered for you, Colonel. It's marked urgent. She handed me a manila envelope. I raised my hand to stop her from leaving. I bent the clasps out of the way, opening the envelope. I slid out the single page. The letters printed in calligraphy. I scanned the paper before lifting my head. A prickling sensation climbed up and down my spine as my heart pounded wildly. Lieutenant Thornhart, did you see the person who delivered this? I asked the tall, lanky redhead. No, Colonel, I went to run an errand. When I came back, it was on my desk. I was only gone a few seconds. She glanced between Colin and me, shifting and reshifting her weight from one leg to the other. Why? Is something wrong, Colonel? Even though her hands were behind her back, I could see her cracking her knuckles. It's nothing for you to worry about, Lieutenant. I gave her a dismissive wave. She left the room, but not before looking back at us every few seconds to see if we changed our minds. Someone had been watching her, I mentally noted. I didn't want to tell her that. It would make her even more nervous. I handed the note to Colin, my hands slightly trembling. See if your people can get any fingerprints off it, Colin, besides yours and mine. Colin grabbed it from me, staring at it a moment before reading it aloud. Your husband is gone without a trace. And without him, you have no case. Him again, you will not see. Unless you meet face to face with me and my family. Meet me tomorrow in the chapel on Charlie 8. Your husband will die if you are 1 minute late. 1,500 hours. Be there. Come alone, if about your husband, you care. He clutched the note, looking up at me. We're in real trouble, aren't we? If you knew how many times we've been in this situation over the years, you'd think that I wouldn't feel as if a cold fist was closing in around my heart, I stated, closing my eyes briefly. I took a deep breath, composing myself from worried wife to peacock, federal agent extraordinaire. Okay, we are going to set up my office as our command central, and for the duration, you can call me Peak or Peacock. I walked toward the doors, motioning for him to follow me. The first thing we have to do is to visit the holding cell because if we have all three of our suspects in holding cells, Elizabeth Meadows is probably holding Nate. I marched out of my office, glancing back to make sure that Colin was trailing me. I stepped into the area where Acacia had been locked up in a holding cell, where I had spoken with her the day before. My eyes widened when I noticed the unoccupied cell. The bed neatly made. The same MO as the other two holding cells, that once held Lieutenant Baker and Captain Anderson. My heart sank. All three had escaped. All three. I searched the cell with my eyes, just as I had the other two. There were no signs of escape. I want to talk to the person in charge of these holding cells. I turned to face Colin, pressing my shoulder against the bars of the holding cell. Right away, Colin said, making the call. He will be here in a few seconds. This is what we will do, I began, moving from one end of the area to the other. We'll talk to this person, then we'll check the overseer to see what clues we can get from it. Just then I noticed the tall, blonde-haired man coming toward us. He stood against the wall opposite us. Standing 6" 2 foot, about 154 pounds, his hair shaved in a crew cut, he put his clasped hands in front of him. You wanted to see me, Colonel, he questioned in a husky voice. Yes, Lieutenant, I said with grave deliberation. I was wondering where the prisoners who are supposed to be in these holding cells are. As you know, you had Alexis Sebastian released, then Lieutenant Colonel Masters had the others released. He now folded his hands across his chest, peering down at me as if he thought that he was right and that I was somehow confused. I gave a startled gasp, staring at him. When I calmed myself, I responded through clenched teeth. Why would I have someone released who tried to kill me twice? I don't know why, but you did. Your voice and authorization codes both verified it as you. At what time did this alleged call take place? I demanded of the blonde security officer. 0924 hours. I laughed, glancing at Colin, who only chuckled. I was on a call with General Graham at that exact time, Lieutenant. I hit my open hand with my fist. I fixed him with a level stare, forcing a smile. Would you like to tell General Graham, who is monitoring this conversation at the moment, that I was releasing a prisoner at that same time? But your voice and authorization code matched, he protested, not affected by the threat of General Graham, convinced that I had gave him the order to release Alexis Sebastian aka Acacia Solomos. Frankly, I don't care if they did. I am standing here in front of you telling you I never gave that order. Now if you see any of the prisoners again, You are to book them, I charged, closing the gap between the officer and me, and only an order from Generals Graham and Ruland and the President of the United States will be able to release them, do you understand? He nodded mutely. His eyes widened as he shifted uncomfortably under my scorching gaze. I continued, standing an inch from his face, and from here on out until further notice, you will only take orders from people who are standing in front of you. Or you will be court-martialed.